Hello and welcome back to Lessons in Attachment. I am Carly Ann. I am the very proud founder of the Attachment Recovery Gym, which is your online space for those of you that relate to anxious attachment and you're really in that place in your healing where you're learning, you're educating yourself, and you're taking action. In terms of where I teach from, it is over a decade of professional experience and 3 decades of personal experience. Really, what I want for you from this podcast is for you to take away ideas and gems to help you also move from insecure towards secure. Today, we have a guest episode. I absolutely love this because I get to bring in different voices, different people with different expertise to really help share a message around healing, around becoming more you. And I love it because what you'll hear in this episode is I feel like a lot of what Gervase speaks about, and introduce her a little bit more in just a moment. But a lot of what she speaks about is what you already hear me talking about on this podcast. Those of you in the membership will really recognize some of these messages, and hopefully that will just help cement some of the key things that I truly, truly believe about our healing. So, for example, we talk about really connecting to yourself. When do we know that something is right for us? And when do we know that it's not? And if that's something we really struggle with, which anxious attaches, or insecure attaches, knowing yourself and what's good for you can be something that's really challenging. So we look at that. We look at the idea of different healing practices and tools and how useful are they? How useful is it digging into the past, looking at the why we act the way we do or the why we feel the way we feel? Is that useful for our healing? Are there certain ways of approaching tools and strategies that are helpful and not helpful? Leading us into a really nice conversation around when you do feel like you're doing all the inner work, when you do feel like you're doing the things that are right, but you're not seeing shifts, you're not seeing the changes. And actually, maybe you're feeling some frustration around that. Maybe you're feeling like you're doing something wrong. There's some really nice discussion there. As well as kind of towards the end of the episode, we go into having a really lovely conversation around the mother wound, which I know plenty of you listening to this can relate to. It's a good time to say that inside the Attachment Recovery Gym, we do have a guest expert workshop in there supporting you with the mother wound. So if that's something you're interested in, you're welcome to become a member. Or if you're already a member, maybe that's something you can go and explore or re-explore. But in general, a lot of this conversation, if you relate to this, I really feel like you're in the right place. So let me tell you a little bit more about our guest expert, and then we will dive straight into the episode. Gervase is an integrative coach with 10 years of experience guiding women home to themselves. Blending her modalities of coaching, hypnotherapy, and vocalizing, she helps women untangle who they've been conditioned to be from who they actually are. They learn to trust the wisdom of their bodies and souls instead of being over reliant on their logical minds. Originally from Queens, Gervase has called Charleston home for the second half of her life and is raising her 3 young children here with her best friend and husband of 14 years. Hello, Gervase.
Hi, Carly.
Thank you so much for being here. I know I've just said that, but really, really, it's like I've been watching and listening to a lot of your stuff. So then
Oh.
get that person in front of you. It's really exciting. But slash also, you're like, okay, can't talk about everything.
No,
So
I am an open book though. So if you want to talk about everything, let's do it. Let's go, girl.
I love it. Tell us first a little bit about what you do. Let's start with the introduction.
Sure. So I have like changed what I call myself so much over the years. I started as a life coach 10 years ago and then for a while now, it's felt like, wow, that really does not encapsulate like my trainings and what I do. So I call myself an integrative coach because I fold in the modalities of focalizing, which is a trauma informed somatic based modality for healing and nervous system regulation, plus hypnotherapy and coaching. And there's always a little bit of inner child healing and visualization and all that stuff. So it's integrative coaching. And I would say, in a nutshell, I help women untangle who they felt they needed to be, as humans on this earth, part of all these different systems and families of origins and a culture, and who they truly are, in their hearts, in their souls, and help them create a life that is more alignment with that authentic identity.
I really love that idea of who people felt they needed to be,
Yeah.
because one of the questions I'll often ask is, yeah, like, okay, so if X hadn't have happened or you hadn't have learned this rule or this belief, what would you be doing? Who would you
Mm.
be? So I really, really love that. Um, in terms of, I do have a question for you,
Okay.
because something really stood out for me in terms of your bio,
Mhm.
which I guess, yeah, people listening, you would have heard that at the beginning of this, just haven't. It was about the people being over dependent on their logical minds. It
Oh, yeah.
really spoke to me, and I just thought, even if we just kind of start with what does that mean? Because I have a
Mhm.
feeling, in fact, no, it's not a feeling, it's a knowing that
Mhm.
a lot of people that come into my world or this space will often say, I logically know so
Mhm.
much, but the actual feeling things, it's like that head heart lag, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's what you are talking about when you say that, but I'm just curious over what that means, that over dependency on our logical mind.
Yeah, well, there's so much different language, right? Like everybody has, it's like talking about God. It's like everybody has universe, spirit, source, right? And so I always offer when I'm speaking about really anything for someone listening to use their own discretion and their own knowing inside of like what is resonant and what is true for you, because this is like let's just start there. Okay, because what I'm about to say, we're meaning making creatures, right? That's just a natural part of yeah, our programming as humans. And so we can get so caught up in like, how does this thing work? This mind and this humaning and healing and dropping out of the logical mind. Like, what's the right way to do it? And so I just always want to start by offering that blanket statement that, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong. There's not one way to have a mind or a body or a heart or a spirit. And so you get to, um, find the terms and the descriptions that work for you. But to answer your question, I would say that I personally come from a background of really over identifying with my thoughts. Really, I'm like a very heady person. I remember as a child looking around at different dynamics in my family and really cognitively like making meaning, understanding things, um, skipping steps. Like I just this thing in my head is like always working and analyzing and thinking. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. However, what I did start to find is that as I got older, there was this other thing happening in my life, which was not articulated. Like I didn't have a word for it, which usually showed up in the form of a decision that I would make. A lot of the work I do is about choices because we're like, how do we take all these concepts in the mind and the body and the intuition and put them in the 3D? And it's like, how do you make choices that are not just made from the mind, but are made from something else, right? That are a collaboration
Mhm.
between the mind, the body, the spirit. And so what I noticed in my life was there were a couple choices that I had made, big ones. Like to give you an example, I after I graduated high school, everybody was like going off to college and I don't know, everybody was making very practical choices, right? Like I always was like, how come my choice is never just like the duh choice? But it just none of the the things I saw my peers doing really were like a yes for me. And I was raised quite an artistic theater kid. My mother was an opera singer. And so she had me auditioning at Juilliard and like all of these really prestigious art schools. And every time I would go into one of those auditions, I would have this like this feeling in my whole body of like, I do not belong here. Like, this is not for me. I also don't have the thing that they're looking for here. And it was hard for me to discern, like, is this confidence or is this a knowing, right? And I don't think I thought about it too much at the time. But then fast forward, I didn't get into any of those schools. And I had this moment of like, oh, what are we going to do? Whatever. And literally, like, right at the perfect time, I got this flyer in the mail for this school in New York City. And I remember looking at the flyer, and it was a integrative arts program, right? So it was music, singing, and dance. And my whole body was like, yes, that is for you. And so, long story long, I ended up going to that school. It was called the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. It's not so prestigious, but it's a very, popular program in New York. And I had exactly the experience that I needed to have. And when I started doing this work of untangling the mind and the conditioning from the knowing of the intuition or the soul or that, and also like the body's signals of like, oh, I'm in this room and I don't belong here. I found certain examples where I found evidence of knowing a thing from a place other than my mind, right?
Mm.
Making a choice that had not been laid out for me perfectly, right? My mom didn't like give me the flyer and say, you're going to go here. It was like I picked up the flyer, I looked at it, and my whole system went, yes. And
Mhm.
so I started to get really curious about that. Like, what is that? What do I call that? How do I also be in deeper relationship with that part of me? Because to me, this was a perfect example of I'm just going to say my system leading me down the path that was really most aligned for me in that moment.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
It does, and it brings up something for me because that is the ideal, right? Is to recognize my body is saying no or it's saying yes.
Right.
What tends to happen a lot of the time with particularly like listeners to this podcast is what you believe is a whole body yes because there is this attachment to something
Mm,
is often not necessarily what's good for you, but it's that familiar, this is what I know, maybe it is what mum told me to go for, or
mm,
the relationships that I'm used to. So do you have that kind of starting point of where you begin to
mhm,
decipher of actually, um, yes, my mind perhaps is telling me this is what I want, this is what I need. But then it
mhm.
can be quite physical, can't it? Because people can feel desperately like they need the wrong person.
Oh my gosh, yes, such a good example. And yeah, so this is where this is why I use the word untangle.
I love
Like
it.
the work is to untangle because this is not just like a cookie cutter process. It's different for every person and it will depend so much on your unique programming, your unique conditioning, your trauma. Of course, trauma shows up in the body as recurring. There's trauma loops, there's like patterns that we just perpetuate over and over and over. And so that's why it's so important to have as part of your process of learning to trust yourself or make decisions that feel in alignment with you know your intentions, let's say, is to start to become intimate with these different parts of you, become really intimate with the body and what she's saying, not just when you're like putting all this pressure on her to make this decision, like, is this the person that I'm supposed to spend all the rest of my life with, but also coffee or tea today? Coffee or tea, right? Because we put so much pressure on ourselves and also the body to shift under pressure, in these high intensity, high stakes examples and moments. And that's in itself another form of like a dysregulated perpetuating of trauma, right? And so what my intention is with women is to always showing them what it feels like to feel safe and resourced within themselves, within their bodies, within their systems on a good day, on a basic day. Like what is your baseline and how do we start to become really um like collect data about yourself, collect data about your history, your patterns, and what feels good because we spend so much time not feeling good. And then from that place of not feeling good, and I don't mean not feeling enough. I just mean like literally not feeling good, like from a place of pushing or forcing or overworking or, doing everything ourselves. And then we're like, is this a full body yes or no? And it's like, it's like that is so much it's just unrealistic. If you think about a child, like putting them in this high intensity, high stakes situation and then being like, by the way, what's the right answer? They'd be like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what here is stress, what here is wisdom. And so it's really helpful to gently untangle it all and get you back to a place of resource where you're feeling just safe within your own system to then start to discern these little subtle messages from the body or, the soul or intuition, etc.
Yeah. I love it because I do believe that we can sometimes ask the question of, okay, is this my intuition? How do I read my intuition?
Mhm.
And we want to learn the how to with that
Mhm.
before, exactly like you said, before we know what we like and what we don't like and
Yeah.
what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And actually, that's one of the places that I know that I really started when I was like, right,
Mm.
things really need to shift, things need to change is it was as basic as, okay, how does this make me feel? What
Yeah.
feels good? Like what does happiness, safety feel like? And then from there, I think you're right that being able to just read myself, understand myself really helped. But what's
Yeah.
interesting is, got a little note here. Your in I think it was your Instagram or your podcast, you said along the lines of if I can find people can get stuck in if I can find my core wound, it will all be okay.
Mm.
So if I can just get to the bottom of the problem, my core wound, then I'm going to be fine. And I see this so much of people like, okay, let's
Mhm.
just get to the bottom. Let's go really, really deep.
Mhm.
And you were saying, and I feel like this is a message that I try to send a lot, is actually, but what feels right? What feels
Mhm.
safe? Are we a bit obsessed with what's the wound? How do I release it, dig
Yes.
deep, that kind of
Yep.
thing. And I'm just
Yep.
going to make one other link because a lot of the time, so with attachment work, people become quite obsessed with avoidant attachment signs. What does the
Mm.
avoidant look like? What's the red flags look like? And we completely forget to learn what does safety feel like, and then you'll know the red flags.
Mm. Yes. Yes, yes,
So
yes.
can you talk a little? I know I went all around the houses, but I feel like kind of what we were saying was really reminding me of that message from you. So if you could talk a little bit on that, I'd love it.
Yeah, what does safety feel like? I mean, you're kind of reminding me I'm in a course right now with Kimberly and Johnson and she's talking about always noticing the mind always wants to go why and just focus on
Okay.
the what. Like what is happening, what is needed instead of like why is this happening? Why did I start doing this? Why do I have this pattern, right? And so that's back to us being those meaning making creatures. And so it is a bit of like working with the monkey mind. And also there's this real, I've been in this industry for a decade, okay? And so when I started, I was like the cuckoo bird. Like, what is she talking about? Like, what is a coach? What is all this? And now I just feel like the tide is like we're addicted to self-help, right? And it's a really fine line to walk as a practitioner, as I'm sure you know. It's like really wanting to um give people their agency back and give them just enough safety so that they can continue forward healing, growing, evolving, but not get obsessed and fixated on psychoanalyzing and like watching these like things on TikTok that tell them like what their trauma is. It's like, no, that's not actually doing the work. That's just going down a rabbit hole, right? And and again, that's consuming information, right? It's like we have so much I have actually a reel I was gonna make. It's like we're addicted to information over wisdom, okay? And and it's so tricky in an age of fast information and so much content, and again, just being the meaning making beings that we are, to kind of like shift people from that addiction to the path of wisdom, the path of safety, not like what is the definition of safety and like what are the 10 somatic moves I can do to get safe and all that stuff, right? It's like when I get someone on a call, it's so much simpler than we want it to be. We want it to sometimes be this big, you know, I don't know, like shamanic experience, and it can be. That's there's no right or wrong, but I also have just found that for myself when I started to really, and I had done so much work, like so much work, all the core wounds everywhere all the time, right? But when I started to really check in with what does safety feel like in my own system? Like, okay, today is an okay day. It's not a super bad day. I'm not super triggered. I'm not in a fight with anybody. Like my kids didn't like totally send me spiraling, but there's a little bit of okay, I'm like checking in with my body. I notice there's like a little bit of anxiety just like running, just like like up and down, right? And so just kind of like being intimate with that part of myself on a good day, on an average day, not from this place of like, there's something wrong. I need to fix it. What is it? Like, why is this happening? To just like, oh, there you are. What would what would allow us to feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit safer, a little bit more like, and finding just the little ways that you can do that, which again, like somatics is so powerful. It's just for me, I'm always talking about looking at the trees. Like, it's really just oh God, what is the word? It's just left my mind. But you're like taking in your surroundings, right? Because you're an animal. You are literally a mammal. And you think that you are instead this like, you know, super analytical, high achieving human with this crazy brain and you're so advanced. But really, we're walking around with these mammal bodies and pretty like evolutionarily old school systems that really just need to survey our surroundings all the time. And if you have never done this and you've just been staring at a computer or like staring at your phone all day long and you just have that that like anxiety running in your body and you notice the shift from that to like let me just take in my surroundings for just 2 minutes. Like what is it like in my system when I look out my window and survey the trees and notice the light on the trees. And what is that like for me? Like, what is it like to be me when I take in my senses? My, hypnosis works with the five senses. Focalizing works with the somatic like experience. And then you just start to notice you just feel a little bit more like your animal is just a little bit calmer, a little bit like, okay, I can take in the four walls of this thing. I see the horizon because that is evolutionarily what our body is designed to do to feel safe, right? So it's again, I think I'm just giving those examples to show that sometimes it's so much simpler than we want it to be. It's like just pause for literally 2 minutes and look at the trees. like so so yeah, and that creates again that feeling good. And then that baseline is is stronger, is like that doesn't make sense, baseline being stronger, but I guess it's like a little bit higher, right? So then your tolerance for all the bad stuff that's gonna happen that day, because you're gonna get the weird email and you're gonna see that thing that triggers you and you're gonna get in an argument with somebody and maybe your package didn't come and whatever. The stuff is gonna happen, but now your baseline is a little bit is boosted, is bolstered, I should say, right? And so you can handle more. And so again, it's like suddenly it doesn't really matter what your core wound is because on a mammal level, you're feeling just a little bit more rooted in your surroundings. You're feeling a little bit more tuned in. You're feeling a little bit more um, secure and grounded. And so the things that come at you as life promises don't need to like totally disarm you so that you need to like go back, down into the well and
Mm.
revisit the trauma, for example.
Yeah, so there's a lot about there. We don't need to revisit the why all the time. We don't need to revisit the trauma all of the time. And I guess this is part of the message that can it sometimes be missed, but is, if you want to do any child work, if you want to do the trauma work, we've got to make sure we connect it to today, right? But
Yes.
how today are you going to feel a bit better? What's the point of you doing that in order to get
Yes.
to where you want to be? And I
Yeah,
feel like we miss that a lot. And I
totally.
can even, of course, I listen to client choice and things like that. But sometimes when I am working with clients and I can see that they just want to explore the past, I can
Mhm.
feel this element of, but what's going to change today? And
Mm,
actually, you're saying it can be really simple. We can ground ourselves, we can look outside, we can start to just look at what makes me feel better. So I do
mm,
really, really agree with this idea that we can get really stuck on that why, what is the wound? Um,
mhm.
and what I know about anxious attachment is there is a bit of a, yeah, I'll use up the word obsession. I'm just aware I've used it a few times in this episode. But with the past,
Mhm,
and whether that is memories, things that I've done, trauma, people that I've dated, people that have let me down, there is
mm.
this just constant, I want to explore the past. So I
Yeah.
think and I love that as well because of the work that you do. You're kind of
Mhm,
saying it doesn't have to be, and I know you're very like passionate about being trauma informed and things like that.
mhm. Yeah. Well, and, like, notice, like, exploring the past, there's nothing wrong with it. It's like we all wanna be witnessed and understood, which of course you are doing and you understand. I think it's just noticing our systems are more comfortable there.
Yeah.
Right? We all just are like, I want to feel good today. So let me tell you about this thing that happened with my mom and let me tell you about it for like 3 hours and so it's like noticing the system does that because the system feels more comfortable. It's a well-worn neural pathway. And
Mhm.
so, it's a tricky line to walk between not judging or shaming the person who feels this attachment to the story and also gently redirecting that person to give them an experience of themselves that will not necessarily translate like into words of like, tell me how you will feel better today, but just like giving them an experience of themselves that is a little bit different than that well-worn neural pathway. And
Mhm.
then there's this thing that happens in focalizing, especially, it's really wild where like I have no idea where where a session is going at any given point. I'm just working with, we're really um trained to work with the natural intelligence of the client's body and like source intelligence, whatever is coming through and trust. And that can feel really uncomfortable because you want to make sure like or I should say the old version of me really wanted to make sure that at the end of this session we are tying this up with a neat little bow and you are going to see how leaving this session you are going to take this with you and make some big changes in your life, right? And it's a lot of pressure to put on the practitioner in general because really what I have found to be even more powerful, and I mean, I think coaching and doing that is super powerful, and I think those of us whose minds are able to work that way, it really is a special thing to show someone not just what's in their way, but the way forward, right? And also, what happens when you can shift someone out of this, like, I'm on that wheel again. I'm talking about my mom and how difficult she is and da 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 into like, "Whoa, those trees are really pretty. Oh, in my body, what does that feel? Well, it feels warm. Oh, put a hand on my body. Oh, that feels like a hug." And now it's like it's almost like the monkey mind is shifting and then the system is feeling something totally new, which is actually subtly, organically using the natural intelligence of the body, healing and alchemizing that old story into something new that, the first few times I had this experience, I could not actually articulate it walking away from the session. I
Mhm.
couldn't be like, so when that happened, I understood that my mom is who she is and I'm going to accept her or whatever. I just had this different wild somatic experience of myself that it was like still like fizzing.
Mhm.
And then I took that moving forward and I just noticed it was just kind of part of me. And so then the next time the email came from my mom, let's say, I was not the same person receiving that email because my system had just slightly shifted into this new baseline. And so, yeah, like trusting the client's agency and journey to take that intelligence of the body and shift their own patterns to feel good and notice moving forward
Mhm.
how that just shifts things just a little bit like that was a huge shift for me, but I think it's very, um, it's like not really discussed a lot, I think. I think this is still new in our world perhaps, and to me it's just so much more empowering, and true.
Yeah.
Because it's working with not just the mind. We're working with everything, right? We're working with our environments, we're working with our bodies, we're working with the nervous system, we're working with intuition and soul and like your emotions, we're working with, you know, the thoughts, all of that. So you can really start to mold a totally different thing.
Mm. So, are there some signs that you see, perhaps, of maybe if someone is doing this inner work and yeah, and they are maybe a bit over dependent on that wound, on the mind still, because something like I've definitely heard is, I'm doing the meditation, I go for that
Mm,
walk, and I still feel these ways. Do you think
yeah.
there's kind of common, I guess, common things that people are still engaging in, or yeah, just any kind of signs really that
Mm.
might be happening?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. And it feels really challenging because, everybody's so different. But I
Mm,
would say personally, I'm not a big fan of like, okay, so we love tools. Of course,
mm.
we love the tools. We want all the tools. Give me the meditation and the
People that
video.
listen to this podcast love the tools. I know you
Oh, I mean,
do.
like I create hypnosis tracks.
No, but
Like
I
it's
love, yeah, no, no, I love bringing other discussions like this. I think it's really, really key. So, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
good
yeah.
to hear. It's really good to hear.
Um, and we have this like expectation energy of these tools and of ourselves. Like when I do the hypnosis, then I will transform, right? And this kind of points to already there is a relationship between you and yourself that is it doesn't really matter what the tool is. You're just going to kind of project that need to fix yourself onto whatever tool you're using. And so the to answer your question about like the signs I see is a bit of that like always searching for the thing that is wrong with them or the way to fix this part of themselves, which I just have to say is like my signature. This was like, I mean, and I still am actively working with this thing where it's like, oh, I feel this thing in me and it's probably the problem. And so if this would just go away, if I could just transmute this with my hypnosis track, I would be transformed, right? And so instead noticing when someone comes with this it can be really subtle or it can be not so subtle, this judgment towards themselves would probably be the sign to make it okay for all of them to be here. It's all me, right? That's why that's the name of my podcast. Like all your parts, your shadow and your light, they are here for a reason. They have kept you safe in different ways. You get to be you. You need all your parts, and we have kind of like whitewashed the psyche. Like we just sanitized it, right? And so because of so much of our brainwashing, we really don't know what to do with that maybe angry part, right? People really feel uncomfortable with their anger, let's say, or their pettiness or when they want to throw a little temper tantrum. And so I think really being attuned to your clients and noticing like, oh, we're working with this other thing. Yes, we're working with all maybe there's anxiety, right? She's working with anxiety. She's doing the meditation track. She's still feeling this thing, but below all of that is actually a judgment towards the self. So how do we create in focalizing, they call this a no shame, no blame container so
Mhm.
that you can really start to consider, and this is not going to happen overnight, consider the idea that it's okay that you feel rage. It's okay. Maybe actually it's like really helpful that that was there at some point and just working with the rage in a way that isn't like, oh, my bad rage, right?
Mhm.
Let me do this hypnosis track so I'm not rageful versus
Mhm.
like curiosity, bringing non-judgment, non-attachment curiosity of like, Wow, rage is here. Okay, rage. Like, all right, girl, I see you. I hear you. You are pissed. Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'm here. What do you need? You know?
Mhm,
That for me has been absolutely life changing because there were parts of myself that I really, despite my best intentions for so long. And again, still working with this, not like a ta-da finished product here, but
mhm,
I've definitely made progress of this. I just always had this judgment towards my dark and stormy side. My depression, I'm like a big feeler. I like feel things so deeply. And so my emotions still sometimes can scare me a little bit where I'm like, "Oh my God, but like Susie over there doesn't feel like I feel." It's like, who fucking cares? You're not Susie. So like let's orient like a no shame, no blame container for you because like you get to be all of you. And so, okay, so you're feeling big feelings today. Okay. What's that like for you? What would it feel like to look at the trees? Does that help? No? Okay. What is it like if you listen to this track? No? Okay. I'm here. What do you need? How can I support this? Not change it. How can I just honor it and witness you, be like a curious, compassionate witness to all the feelings that you're feeling until they're done? Because you know what? That stress cycle or like those emotions, that tide, I don't know about you, but for me, when that tide comes, when that tidal wave comes, like it's coming. No hypnosis track, no tool except for feeling my freaking feelings fully without judgment is going to stop it. And
mhm.
so, as a culture, we are not taught how to be with our emotions, and especially those of us who are highly sensitive, which I have a whole house full of those. Um, it's big work that sometimes can leave you feeling like, "What's wrong with me?"
Yeah.
Because it's not mainstream, because we don't have the tools, which is really just like compassion and destigmatizing emotions to
Mhm.
work with that and then just be like, "Oh, yeah, that'll pass. That's okay."
Yeah.
You know?
I completely agree with everything that you said. And I
Mm,
guess some of what really stands out is that idea of, yeah, that reliance on tools. And I see that a lot in terms of, I mean, firstly, I think it can be questionable of how much we practice the tools
mm,
before we're looking for the next one. So that idea of, like you say,
right.
searching, looking for the next thing, tried that,
Yeah.
didn't work. Tried
Mhm.
looking at the trees, it didn't work.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
And I talk a lot about this 1% idea, but if I was to feel 1% better, if there's something that I need 1% in this moment, 'cause sometimes that's the difference between saying that thing, you know?
Yes.
Um,
Totally.
so that I try to take that approach. So that was really coming through when you were saying that. But yeah, this idea of, I guess it's that idea of like rushing your healing,
Yes.
and you want it now. And if I'm still feeling anger and I'm still feeling these feelings, I've worked in like most of my career in mental health. And it's a lot of the time actually, I would say with anxiety, I see that fear of being anxious, like a
Mhm.
real worry about the anxiety. What I tend to see when people have low mood is they really struggle when they're on there, they're doing well, starting to see their mood lift, and then they have a bad day
Mhm.
and they really, really struggle with that. And a
Mhm.
lot of the I feel like a lot of the change there is around, "Oh, yeah, no, we have bad days."
Yes.
That's going nowhere. It's like me, I still get insecure,
Yes.
it's not like these things have just disappeared, but yeah, like you say, tolerating them and things like that.
Mhm.
So I really hear that, the looking for the tools, the judging yourself at the speed of it or things not happening quick enough, and I think there's some really key things to look out for. And then you
Mhm.
talk about the compassion and the curiosity, and it's just you're speaking my language.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah. The human language.
this
Language of humans,
yes, yeah.
not AI. It's
Well,
crazy.
yeah, these days. What do you make of it then in terms of, do you have those? You've mentioned it seems like there's something about nature for you. There's something
Mhm.
about like looking at the trees and things like that. Do you have any other go-to getting your body movements, tools, ideas? I know we're literally talking about tools, but are there anything? And I guess
Mm.
it is that idea of tools that fit naturally into life.
Yes.
You don't have to take time out to look at the trees, you know?
Yes.
You can you
Yes.
we can make time. I really believe we can do that.
Yeah. Right, because it's really just slowing down
Slower
our
living.
lives, like
Yeah.
unhooking from this capitalistic
Yeah.
speed at which we are orienting to and making declaring, like, I am not doing this. Like, I am still of the real world. I still have deadlines and bills and kids and schedules. And also, when I feel that like urgency, that absolute psychotic panic within me, which is, guess what? Still here sometimes. I
Mhm.
have to remind myself of like, this is not real. This is not me. Actually, nothing's going to happen if I'm late or I push that back a day or I pause, except for I will be tending to myself as, a part of nature and not a machine. And so for me, bringing in nature was really critical because I was all in on the hamster wheel. I was like, this is just the way it is. And like, what am I supposed to do? And must be nice. Like I was all of those like, avatars of that are like now my clients, right? Because it's very it really just pulls you in the psychotic pace that our culture likes to pretend is normal. And so slowing down is really first happens in the mind where you just give yourself permission and you understand the reason this feels hard is because I've been brainwashed. Like the reason it feels so scary for me to actually go for a walk and just like tend like 5-minute walk, an hour long walk, I don't know, take a day off. The reason this feels so terrifying is because my system is actually attuned to this machine, which is capitalism. And whatever. I'm not here to like break the machine or anything, but I am suggesting what happens if I can just say like, "Oh, that's interesting." And what's this machine being the body? What would she love right now? And sometimes it's like, "Could you like get a glass of water?" Like it's like, "Could you like call your best friend? Could you put on more comfortable pants? You've been wearing these like tight high-waisted jeans all day and it's just." Right? It's like just noticing the inclination not to stop, the inclination not to pause, not to tend. Another example I'll give about this that I was, I think, sharing in my podcast recently is I had this big hip injury that happened. Well, I've been working with hip injuries since I gave birth like 10 years ago the first time. And it's just kind of been like this low level pain that I've had forever that comes and goes. And then I pulled a hamstring in November. And as I started working with like the right kind of practitioner to really help me, it was like time for me to like go a couple layers deeper into the body where trauma was being stored, where these like patterns were really continuing to keep me injured and explore what was there. And what I noticed was the the practitioner, she was like, every time you feel hip pain and you're sitting at your desk, I want you to change positions. And I was like, that's so stupid. Like, what? That's so basic, right? And she's like, but just do it every time, even if it's just constantly. Like, don't keep your system in that painful position because then your system is orienting, it's making that normal, right?
Mhm.
I was changing positions like I was like just constantly wiggling around in my chair, but I noticed so much resistance to just shifting to the right because I was like, "No, I'm this is fine. This is good." Right? And so it was like another like a reflection of the macro in my micro, if that makes sense, right? I was like, "Whoa, I
Mhm.
literally will not pause and change the position of my body to feel better because I just think either like, what's the point? Or this is just how it is. This pain is just the way it is. And so, what we're really trying to do constantly with this work is just get out of this um, habitual way of operating with our bodies, with our thoughts, with our habits, out of this is just the way it is. And it's just low level simmering dis-ease, like,
Mhm.
like anxiety or whatever, and just shifting into, I wonder what would feel just a 1%. I love that so much. What would feel just 1% better today?
Mhm.
1%. What's one thing I could do today that would make me feel 1%
Mhm.
better? And so Sorry, I just went on this tangent, and I think your specific question was, "What are my tools?" And I would say once you are addressing it from that place, the world is your oyster. You could literally be like, "I'm gonna, like, pick up some oracle cards and journal for 10 minutes today," and that would make me feel I'm gonna light a candle. I'm gonna put some, perfume on or, like, whatever your oils are. I'm gonna, um yeah, I do, self-vocalizing, which again, like, that's just my modality, so it's the one I'm the most familiar with, which is just almost like closing my eyes and doing a body scan, and I will either set a timer for 5, 10, or 15 minutes if that feels good, and I will share with you I shared this with the girls in my program recently. I set a timer for 10 minutes, I was having a bad day, I was like, "What's the tool?" Set a timer, close my eyes, self-focalize, and what I see immediately, because 'cause I'm highly visual, which a lot of women are who end up working with a hypnotist, obviously, and immediately I literally get this visual of like a tiger, like prancing, Jesus, what's it called? Um, Pacing, like a tiger pacing, and my eyes fly open and I'm like, I need to run.
Mhm.
Literally feel like a tiger pacing a cage, and I do not need to meditate right now. I do not need to focalize. I do not need to close my eyes. I need to just move, and I just, like, threw on my shoes and started running until I did not feel like a tiger pacing, right? But it's all again, also, it's just being fluid and flexible with it. Like, make the tool support you. Don't be a slave to the tool, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really key message because we have to be able to adapt, isn't it, to our lives, our learning styles, what our baseline happiness is, whatever it is, and I think that one size fits all idea is perhaps part of the problem sometimes. Um,
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you the three questions, if that's okay.
Okay. Yes.
Um, so what I would love to know is love, what it means to you if you had to share with us your definition, your meaning, and maybe even if it's changed over time.
Mm. It's so beautiful and makes me feel almost like a little bit tender because I am always rediscovering what love is as particularly as a mother and a wife. And, I really came in thinking like, I know it's unconditional. You just love whatever. And what I'm really seeing is that it is raw vulnerability. It is like cracking your heart open. I just see like a bleeding heart and just like offering it to someone imperfect, messy, um, just trying. I think that we want love to be this the perfect heart, the T Swift heart, And it really my experience is that it's in the intending, the trying, like I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm.
I'm really sure that I'm like screwing this up, but here is my raw, vulnerable trying, best effort. Like, I wanna meet you, I wanna give you to give. It's so much giving, and knowing that it's gonna sometimes, break you open and feel just like so much and, like, not enough. And
Mhm.
that's normal. That's just part of being human. It's just
Yeah.
constantly changing and messy.
I'm kind of hearing as you say that, or what's coming up for me is that question around, do we need to be healed before we're in relationship? Do I need to
Mm,
reach a certain point before I'm in relationship? And
mm,
it's certainly something that I have, that's definitely something that I questioned in the past, but that I've really come to know within myself. And from my experience, absolutely not. Is that
mm,
even is that even possible that we're going to be in that
totally.
that perfect heart space and I'm ready and I can handle it all?
Yeah, and what a relief you just gave everyone,
Mhm.
because we just are addicted to being perfect. And how could we not be? Like, the
Yeah.
message we have gotten loud and clear is like, be perfect. don't let it be messy. And so it would be such a shame to like miss out on, partnership because you were just waiting to be this perfect finished masterpiece. I've
Mhm.
been married for 14 years and let me tell you. It's really just a willingness like you're saying and the I do think something about sovereignty, like being radically responsible, right? You don't have to be like healed, but what is it like when you're responsible for yourself and loving all your parts even when your partner sees and you're like, "Oh my god, this is really embarrassing because this is a part of me that" ugh," you know?
I love that.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I guess thinking about when it is messy, because it can be amazing, but also what I know, and I know probably many people listening to this right now can be really in the thick of the painful side of it.
Mm,
So, and whether that's single, whether it's in a relationship. So, how do you navigate when, things have been going well and then love
mhm,
throws you off? And it doesn't have to be,
mhm,
romantic love, any kind
mm.
of love. When it throws you off, how do you navigate that?
How do I navigate that? Well, I guess sticking with the macro being a reflection of the micro. What I've learned is like when something's happening with me and someone I love that feels uncomfortable for me, or I feel really at fault or self-righteous or something like that. I'm always really curious about like what is this highlighting in myself? Like what about this is uh, fertile ground in me to kind of like dig up and explore what's here because usually like the friction, the contrast in love is is not possible unless there's something in you too that feels really stirred up, right? So for example, my relationship with my mother has been a constant exploration and trial and error. And at the beginning, every single interaction with her felt extremely aggravating and disheartening. And now I feel more neutral about it. I mean, I've been working on that one for like 2 decades, right? Like 20 years, right? And so it's not that it's perfect at all. It's not that she's changed, but the only thing that's changed is my compassion for myself, my like there's nothing hiding here that's gonna come up when my mom sends that email that's gonna throw me in a tizzy because I know all the parts. I know the shadow part of me that is just really angry because she wanted a different mom. I know the part of me that just feels really, like, unseen, and so I hold space for those parts of me, and so that allows that relationship to feel a little bit more peaceful and less like this, and so in case it's not in case I'm not making sense, um, I'm just always curious, like, I know what I think my husband did wrong. I know why I'm pissed at my kids, but like what's going on in me
Mhm.
that needs tending, that needs resource, that needs attention, that maybe just needs like a hug? Like what's my little girl
Mm,
ha- experiencing or needing and how can I hold space for her first? How can I resource myself first? How can I regulate myself first? And then come back to this conflict. And when I do that, I always come back and I just feel again like pretty neutral about it. I'm like, "Oh, do you wanna just hug and make up?" Like, "Oh, I don't" right? Because so often the battle, it feels like we're at this battle with the other person, but really it's like internal warfare.
yeah.
Um, and so yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Yeah. That, like I've said it already, but you're speaking my language. And yeah, the example with your mum, I fully relate to. I actually
Mm,
have a membership, and we had someone come in and talk to us about mother wound.
mm,
So I
so
know
good.
certainly many of the listeners that are also in that membership, I'm sure that spoke to. So thank
Oh,
you.
good.
Um, so you get to go back to any age
Mhm,
and give yourself a lesson in love. you
Mm.
can't say there's no regrets or that you wouldn't change a thing, what lesson would you go and give yourself?
Hmm. I mean, I did read this and now it's like hitting me in a totally new way since we're talking about the mother wound.
Mm,
Um, if I could go back to any age, I think I'm 8 and I am having this experience where I just feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of the love that I so deeply crave. And I just want to tell that version of me that um, no one can give you something that they don't have themselves.
mm.
And it has nothing to do with you. And it's not even personal. And it's not even something that they can control sometimes. Like our parents, so many of them did not get what they needed. And so they came to us under resourced. And so if I just had really understood that, really understood at a young age, like she can't give you what she can't give herself. And she doesn't have the tools, she doesn't have the awareness. She wasn't given that to even start with. That would have really probably changed everything for me.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Honestly,
Thank you.
like I appreciate the whole conversation. I appreciate your being open with us and like vulnerable in that way as well. There's something about hearing personal experience, isn't there? And you just kind of connect on that other level. Um, where can people find you?
Mm. You can find me at my website, gervasekolmos.com, or my podcast that you are going to be on soon,
Mm,
the It's All Me podcast. That's my coaching framework, the It's All Me um, framework, and on Instagram at Gervase Kolmos.
amazing. And if anyone's watching on YouTube, they can see all of those details right there. Um, Thank you so much. You're
Thank you.
amazing. I'm excited to continue to really, once you've connected, it's almost like it's a bit different. I'm excited to,
Totally.
I feel like I'm going to listen to your podcast and watch everything almost through like a different lens.
Mm.
So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me and for this beautiful conversation.